A statue stands. Michelangelo's David is one of the most representative pieces of art ever created. The sculpture is over half a millennium old, and it has survived some of the most bellicose events in history, including World War II and Hitler's desire to possess it. The first time the masterpiece was threatened was in 1527, a mere 23 years after its completion. During a civil uprising, a political activist threw a chair out of a window in the Palazzo Vecchio and broke David's left arm in 3 places. After the outbreak of World War II, the Accademia Gallery protected the sculpture with sandbags. But in January of 1943, more protection was needed, and it was hidden beneath a brick dome. The David and several other invaluable Michelangelo sculptures were all protected in this manner until the war ended. It was estimated that Florence held approximately 10% of the world's art treasures. Unfortunately, the U.S. Army had no option but to bomb the city on March 11, 1944. For roughly 6 months, the Germans had halted the American advance on the ground, and a decisive airstrike could turn the tide. However, maps were distributed with white rectangles marking the locations of the artistic landmarks to prevent any damage under any circumstances. The David and all the other masterpieces were saved that day due to the precision of the Allied bombing. Author Robert Edsel later wrote that it, quote, may well have been the most precise bombing mission of the war. When the war ended, preservationist Dean Keller wrote, quote, the bright spot yesterday was seeing Michelangelo's David at length divested of its air raid protection. It was dusty and dirty, but it was a great thrill. Other than a hacked toe that a vandal hammered in 1991, Michelangelo's David remains untouched at the Accademia Gallery, where millions come to visit it from all over the world. Fugitive. When the Germans occupied France, they were eager to take its art treasures and planned to secure the collections under the Kunstschutz principle. But when they arrived at the Louvre on August 16, 1940, the museum was almost empty. Days before World War II broke out, Jacques Jaujard, director of the French Musée National, set in motion a secret evacuation. In August of 1939, the museum closed for 3 days, claiming it was undergoing repair works, but in reality, hundreds of employees and workers wrapped all its invaluable contents in waterproof materials and packaged them in white wooden boxes. The last piece of art to leave the museum was the Winged Victory of Samothrace. Much of the collection was transported in 203 vehicles, packed in 1,862 cases, and sent to Château de Chambord. The crates were marked to identify the value of their content, in which a yellow circle meant very valuable, a green one meant major works, and a red one was for world treasures. One of the most representative artworks known to humanity, the Mona Lisa, was inside a crate marked with 3 red circles. The mysterious lady departed the Louvre on August 28, 1939, and moved 5 times, first to Chambord, and then to the Loire Valley castles and abbeys to avoid being seized by the enemy. Several works of art were temporarily guarded in quiet places in the French countryside during the Nazi occupation. This strategy kept them safe from possible bombings. However, remaining art that couldn't be removed was taken by the invaders, and considerable amounts of antiquities from the Middle East vanished during the war. When German curator Franz von Wolf-Metternich, responsible for the conservation of the French collections, arrived at the Louvre on August 16th of 1940, he found an empty museum. He knew exactly what was happening, but decided not to do anything about it. By the end of the war, the Mona Lisa was located at the Musée Ingres in Montauban, and it was then returned to her home in Paris. Today, the antique painting is considered too fragile to be moved. The Last Stand. Leonardo da Vinci's legacy remains one of the most important to the art and culture of the West. One of his most famous works, The Last Supper, was almost lost to humanity during an air raid over Milan in 1943, but something unbelievable happened. The Last Supper was finished in 1495 and has survived over 5 centuries of human conflict. The first time it was threatened was during Napoleon's Italian War, when French soldiers allegedly used the face of Jesus as a bullseye to practice shooting. But in 1943, the masterpiece was threatened by more than bullets. The mural on the wall of Santa Maria della Grazia in Milan had to be saved from the pummeling bombardment of the Allied air forces and was thus covered with sandbags and scaffolding with immense care. On August 15, 1943, the church was blown to pieces. Other Catholic landmarks, like the Duomo and Santa Maria del Carmine, were damaged, but Santa Maria delle Grazie was almost completely wiped out. Its cloister collapsed, while most walls and a significant part of the roof were crushed. Dean Keller, professor at Yale University and leader of the Monuments Men, was heavily concerned that the painting had been lost forever, but to everyone's surprise, the mural was found almost intact when it was uncovered a few months after the bombing. The mural was restored in the late 20th century, and the original color palette was recreated by an expert team of scientists and art historians, not to mention skilled restorers. But to this day, it remains a mystery how the mural could have survived the bombing, and many consider it a miracle. Seeking refuge. During World War II, the collection inside the National Gallery in London needed to be saved from Nazi attacks, but transporting them overseas was not an option, given the lethal U-boats roaming the waters. In 1940, Winston Churchill commanded, quote, "Hide them in caves and cellars, but not one picture shall leave this island." Innumerable art pieces were destroyed or looted during World War II, never to be contemplated and appreciated again. But thankfully, a significant part of the cultural heritage was saved due to the heroic effort of individuals and institutions alike. The Elgin marbles were hidden in a tube station in Aldwych, which wouldn't have withstood a direct hit. Meanwhile, the British Museum shipped valuable pieces by Michelangelo, Raphael, and Leonardo da Vinci, as well as rare books by Shakespeare and Milton, to Aberystwyth in Wales. They were kept at the National Library, but they were taken to a recently dug underground cave in the middle of the war. Although the initial proposal was to ship everything to Canada, the possibility of U-boat attacks discarded the option. Hence, 1,800 paintings from the National Gallery were hidden in an ancient slate mine in Manod, Wales. The entrance was enlarged with explosives so the largest pieces could fit, and a railway was built to move the artworks around the caves. Minna Moore Ada, the curator of the National Gallery, said that, quote, "They were sleeping down there." As the war ended, much had been learned about painting preservation, ironically ushering in a new era of conservation at the gallery. As for the cave at Manod, it was always kept a secret, but it was maintained as a clandestine evacuation site until the early 1980s, in case a nuclear war broke out. Plan B. Hitler always had a grand vision for a Führer museum. The Nazi mandatory planned to turn his childhood hometown of Linz into the world's most extensive collection, containing the most refined exemplars of art and culture. Thus, the Nazis stole a massive amount of art during the war. Much of the art seized by the Germans from the best museums in Europe ended up in the Austrian salt mine of Altaussee. Hitler regarded its complex series of tunnels as the perfect hideaway for the stolen pieces. In addition, the inside conditions were ideal for conservation, constantly shifting between 40 and 47 degrees and with around 65% humidity. Furthermore, its deepest spaces were secluded more than a mile inside the mountain, keeping the collection from enemy bombs. The Germans conditioned the complex by building floors, walls, shelving, and even establishing a workshop. Tons of treasures were streamed into the tunnels from 1943 to early 1945. However, before the end of the war, Hitler ordered that anything of use to the enemy should be destroyed, including the invaluable artworks at Altaussee. In April of 1945, 8 crates labeled "Marble, Do Not Drop" were carried into the mine, but they actually contained 1,100-pound bombs. It's believed that local miners thwarted the Führer's plans, and that a Nazi official allegedly swapped the bombs that could have destroyed the entire collection for weaker ones. Thus, only the entrance was brought down and blocked by rubble. George Stout and the Monuments Men arrived at Altaussee in May of 1945, shortly after the hostilities ended. They found over 6,500 paintings, including works by Michelangelo, Vermeer, and John van Eyck's notorious Ghent altarpiece, along with thousands of drawings, prints, sculptures, and several other artistic techniques. However, sorting out the origins of all the artworks is an ongoing project to this day. Thank you for watching my video. Please subscribe to our channels for more historical anecdotes and amusing stories. And let us know in the comments below if you'd like to see a specific story featured in our videos.